اليوم بدنا بعرف إنه مش حيطلع الصوت شباب، بس بدنا نحكي عن الموضوع بشكل عام. هذا فيديو أنا اخترت لكم. الفيديو, it's a documentary by the BBC. It talks about top 10 philosophers, and I will download it to you on the channel. And it's kind of considering the top 10 philosophers. Of course, this can differ from one person to another who are the top. Okay. But they are all great philosophers, whether you want to name them as top 10 or whatever. They are historically significant philosophers affected by who affect their ideas and ideologies and principles affected their societies deeply, and they belong to what is civilizations. And here you can see, you can see that we have different ideas, and the BBC here tried to take a good idea to take certain images, certain philosophers, and they would discuss their achievements in it. It's very brief, but it's here we can start with number one. I try to make them briefly here. Let me choose. Wait, let me stop it here. So this is Hume, David Hume. You can see here David Hume. Okay, I will put them for you on the screen later. David Hume, as you can see here, he is one of the famous philosophers, very important one. He is an English philosopher. He was, as you can see, born in 1711 till 1776. He was known at that time also as a historian. He wrote many essays, and he was known for a famous philosophical work, which is called Treatise of Human Nature. This is his work, a Treatise of Human Nature. And also he has another work very famous that is called the Inquiries. And the Inquiries were concerning human understanding. So very famous, two famous works, a Treatise of Human Nature and the Inquiries concerning human understanding. Here you can see his major works. Also, he has the Principles of Morals. David Hume is known for all discussions of ethical, that has the ethical ideas and dialogues. He also has published what is called Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion. So he was also concerned with theology, so not only ethics and theology. And he was considered as very, very influential at that time. And until nowadays, all philosophers use his, philosophies and discuss his philosophies. Now, he is originally a Scottish philosopher, let's say, and he is known for his field of skepticism. This is the word, skepticism, which is to be skeptic. If you have you raise certain questions and you try to answer them, but still you are not sure whether this is the right answer or not. And in modern philosophy, or what is called in early modern philosophy, he raised the idea of hypothesis and how the human behavior is owned by passion rather than reason. This is his idea. So he is a fighter for reason against passion, and he believes in free will and in cognition, the human cognition. Of course, many ideas were raised and writings between to consider his moral philosophy, and also he has writings in the economic field. again, he wrote his friend, one of his friend who was so famous is Adam Smith. I'm sure you know Adam Smith, a very well-known philosopher or thinker in the field of in economy. Also, Kant, another philosopher, we'll talk about later. Kant reported that Hume's work were highly dogmatic. Now, dogmatic is in the field of philosophy that you cannot change, and you have to think deeply in. And also, according to Jeremy Bentham, he was remarked, another philosopher. He was remarked as when he read Hume's work that he caused the scales to fall from his eyes, which means that he was thinking of him as having a central influence, and he influenced deeply what is known till nowadays as the theory of evolution. So he is like a scientist, and he believes in reason. So he developed contemporary also moral philosophy. He dealt with different branches of philosophy. One of them is naturalism, philosophical naturalism, and the human nature, as we discussed before. Also talked about life, the treatise or inquiries of life and human beings. He has a very important also work, which is about the mind, and how Hume defined the word mind was based on reason as opposed to passion. Okay, he dealt with an idea of course, you can see any of these items by clicking on them, but I'm just going to talk about some of them. I'm selecting some of them. Now, causation, this is the idea of causation, talking about how the human mind the causal inference, which is the beginning of critical phase and critical thinking. So cognitive and constructive building of thinking was very well known at that time, but because of Hume, the philosopher Hume. Now, also he tried to work on rationalism and reasoning, or the use of mind by reasoning, to reach what is called moral rationalism. So he was thinking that by using a moral rational reasoning, the mind can reach moral principles. So that was his main idea in his critical phase in the treatise here. And also he talked about sentimentalism when he discussed passion as against or versus reason and rationalism. Also, he talked about justice as the end of moral rationalism. So he reached, when he talked about moral rationalism, he said that justice is the end. If you think about it, and if you rationalize and use your mind reasonably, you have to reach this matter, which is justice, as a constructive phase, according to him, which means constructing or building upon the hypothesis that he began with, you will end with justice. He also discussed, as I told you, theology and philosophy of religion. He considered many characters in his discussion. He talked about the attributes of God and the natural attributes of God, and the moral attributes of God, how God is considered according to him and to his natural reasoning. And he also, here I can see that he has many works related. For example, let's see some of his human works. As you can see here, the Treatise of Human Nature. We have an abstract of a Treatise of Human Nature. Okay, we have an inquiry concerning human understanding. Of course, many books and articles were written on this. Also, he has an inquiry concerning principles of morals and the letters of David Hume. So they used at that time to send letters, philosophers and thinkers and those who used to write in newspapers and in journals, and to send themselves some letters expressing their ideas that they believed in. So they collected them, and they generated this book that is the letter of David Hume letters. And also he had an autobiography also about his life, my own life, referring to David Hume, and some dialogues concerning natural religion, and so on. And here you can see other works by him, like the dissertation on the passion and natural history of religion, moral and political literary, and also history of England. So he's historian, as you can see. He is politician, he is philosopher, and theologist also. And letters of David Hume that we talked about, but he was mainly concerned with, when we say Hume, we always think about his cognitive style and his reasoning and his way of thinking of things in a reasonable way. So his skepticism is known as the major part of his way of thinking. Of course, he also has a book on, as you can see here, true skepticism. We have also custom and reason in Hume. So he was comparing what's happening in life and customs and referring everything to reason, and talking about passion and values also. And that led him to the discussion on moral issues, and a progress of sentiments and reflections on Hume's treatise. Many other books were, these are other philosophers that dealt with Hume's works. Also Death and Character, further reflections on Hume, and Hume's difficulty in his philosophy here, and the problem of causation, which is السببية in Arabic, okay? قانون السببية, or العلة. Okay, that's causation. So he was the one to discuss it philosophically, and he talked about, there's another book wrote about him, learning from 6 philosophers. And of course, David Hume was one of those important 6 philosophers. Essays on quasi-realism. Quasi-realism, it is semi-realism, okay? And Hume's philosophy of mind. So now you can understand how Hume thought. It's all concentrated on philosophy of mind and skepticism that led to the theories on his moral thinking and his ethical beliefs. Okay, you can see here also Hume's Enlightenment track, which is about the unity of and purpose of an inquiry concerning human understanding. Also, you have the moral and political philosophy. So also he moved from moral issues into political issues. So political philosophy was his concern too. Okay, and also many people discussed his Hume's skepticism on naturalism concerning knowledge and causation. So they took his method of reasoning and ideas as an evidence. Also Hume's epistemology. So, and this is a term that if you remember when we talked about knowledge and understanding knowledge and the philosophy of knowledge, this is epistemology. And metaphysics, thinking beyond physics, okay, beyond physics. And here, through his way of skepticism, he reached certain questions. He tried to answer certain questions concerning the field of epistemology and metaphysics. Also, Hume's abject failure, the argument against miracles. So he was considering here the way that we think by reasoning and how we treat miracles, how we think about miracles. Is it false or true according to his skeptic method. Hume's variations and skepticism, which is the in the treatise of human nature, the defense of human's miracles, and so on. Okay, till the end. I would love to let you have a look on that. So here you can see two different the list of his works. Okay. And of course, we'll go back to each later. But now I'm just giving you an idea about the major way he used, the major principles that David Hume used to think about. Now let's continue the video. I know that you cannot hear it, but I will talk about it. So this is the first one, David Hume. Now here they try to illustrate some of them. So he was talking about ideas of hypothesis. Okay, then that's and he tried to put the major ideas and how to work on scientific research. Okay, beginning with your hypothesis till you prove them, or you prove or not. Okay, this is the idea that David proved. Okay. So he tried to concentrate on passion, on reason against passion, and talking about the free will of human beings, of course. That is the cognitive style of thinking. So he was also taken as the one who established what is called nowadays cognitive science. Okay, because all his studies were based on mind and reasoning and skepticism and so on. Okay, and he was talking about the different senses that you can use them to explore and to prove reality. Okay, the different senses. Now, this is another philosopher that we'll talk about later. He's called Jean-Paul Sartre. Okay, as you can see here, Jean-Paul Sartre. The one that I gave you an example before. Here is Jean-Paul Sartre. You can see that he is known to be. He said that to be human is to be conscious. So now let's talk about Sartre, and based on what we took last time, we can say that Jean-Paul Sartre is a French philosopher. As you can see, this is his photo, and of course now I'm giving you the philosophers. They are not in different years. Okay, so scattered in different years. We have, so he was a playwright also. He was a novelist. Sartre is known as a novelist and playwright rather than a philosopher. Okay, and then they considered his works as talking about philosophy indirectly through the use of literature. Okay. So he is also a screenwriter, political activists. All French philosophers and thinkers at that time can be considered as political activists because of the French Revolution and what took place later on in discussions. Also a biographer and literary, you see, this is very important, literary critic. So he has evaluated different works in literature. And he tried to. He was considered also as the philosopher of existentialism. This is very important. So, الفلسفة الوجودية in Arabic. Okay. So, what is existentialism? It's a form of philosophical inquiry, as you can see here, that explores the problem of human existence. So, this is the idea. We are talking here about human existence. This is his discussion. His major work was on human existence. And he was the one to experience the idea of thinking and feeling and action of any individual. And he was raising what is called the existential angst, or what is called as a sense of existentialism. And also he discussed, he was the founder of another school in philosophy, which is called phenomenology. Okay, and it goes from two words here, phenomenon and logy. Okay, which is the study of phenomena. Okay, it is phenomena. Sorry, it is the philosopher. He is the philosopher who studied the structure of experience of the self. Okay, so experience of the self. So in Arabic also they call it phenomenologia. So they don't translate it. They coined the word and use it in Arabic also. So he is a philosopher. This is a philosophical movement, as you can see, that worked on what was discussed by another philosopher in 20th century who's called Edmund Hosser. And he was later thought of as the founder of this school. Now, he was also a leading figure, as you can see, in the 20th century in French philosophy, and also discussed lots of things in Marxism, another philosopher that we'll talk about later. Now, his works, Sartre, his works were influenced in sociology and critical theory and what is called post-colonial theory. In Arabic, they call it ما بعد الكولونيالية. Okay, which is affected by the main activists in France at that time. That he had many literary studies, as I told you. He is known. He's very well known. Not only him, and most of the French writers and philosophers at that time were known to be prominent as feminists. So he was with feminism. And as you can see, feminism is a range of social movement. It is considered as, in the beginning, as political movement, but later on he discussed lots of ideologies that try to, or they aim to free women and to give them their rights, whether politically, economically, or concerning social equality, okay? Equality of the sexes, or what we call gender issues. So he was with women, and he was a feminist, treated as a feminist. And he also was a fellow existential philosopher and a writer with Simone De Beauvoir, another philosopher and writer at that time. Very well, two famous philosophers. Now, Sartre and De Beauvoir challenged the cultural and social assumptions at that time, and they thought that were taking place because of the ideas of, bourgeois or bourgeoisie as a lifestyle that was at that time conflicting with what Marx used to say at that time, where you can see split or different parties and political parties because of the structure of society at that time. So he thought also about major principles. Some of his works were very well known, like the work of being and nothingness. Al-wujud, in Arabic they call it al-wujud wal-adam. This is the Arabic translation, and I know that in English department you need to know sometimes the right translation. So it's being and nothingness, al-wujud wal-adam. In French, it is l'être et le néant. Okay, l'être, which is être is being in French, and néant is nothingness. Okay, néant is nothingness. Okay, so that was in 1943. Very, very famous book or work by Sartre, Being and Nothingness. Okay, and there you can see his work that constructed what is called existentialism, is humanism. This is very important. So he is the founder of existentialism, al-wujudiyya, al-falsafa al-wujudiyya. So, and it was based on humanism, فكرة الإنسانية. Okay, and this is the French translation, because he wrote it in French, as you know. It is l'existentialisme et un humanisme. Okay, which is الوجودية هي إنسانية. Okay, يعني هي فلسفة إنسانية. And that was presented also as a lecture. Of course, he was awarded in 1964. He took the Nobel Prize, but that was in literature, not in philosophy. And of course, he was considered a writer, a very famous writer who did not allow himself to be turned into an institution. So this is very important. This is, you can see here his education. His education, École Normale Supérieure. This is a very famous university in Paris. And also the partners, his partner was this one, Simone De Beauvoir, a political activist and feminist. And he is considered to be in the 20th century as one of the major philosophers. And we study him when we study Western philosophy, and you can see this is his schools: existentialism and phenomenology, and also you can talk when you discuss Marxism and anarchism. Anarchism is a political philosophy. It refers to the word anarchy. It refers to the movement that is skeptical of authority and rejects all involuntary coercive forms of hierarchy. So it goes to it's like فوضوية in Arabic. He called for what is called the abolition of the state. He was against state formulation, and he wanted to discuss what is undesirable and unnecessary and what is harmful. He thought that he thought that this is similar to what the Marxists used to believe in. Okay. So here are some of his notable ideas also. Like as I said before, he talked about faith and existence, okay, and nothingness, okay, and the idea of transcendence, phenomenology, which is transcendence of the ego, تعالي الأنا in Arabic, okay, تعالي الأنا, الأنا المتعالية, okay. Which is the philosophy here that is rooted in phenomenology, okay? And that was even some of the terms that are discussed here are from his invention. So they are Sartrean terminologies, okay? And this is how he used to sign, okay, Jean-Paul Sartre. So a very famous, also you can see here some of he was a critic, okay, he was known in literature as a critic, and it's very difficult if you try to understand his works. They are very difficult to be understood. He has that style of writing in literature that is not clear. Okay, so this is the way he tried to handle things in philosophy. Okay, you can. I will leave to you all such all his works here, so that you can understand him more. So we'll talk about each philosopher later, of course, in depth. And he was considered as, you can see, one of the main thinkers. He has this work, Critique de la raison dialectique, which is a critique of dialectical reason. So, and this is a portrait for him that was discussed in various magazines and newspapers. At that time, it was York Times as a sketch for him. Lots of thoughts were discussed because of him concerning his ideas of existentialism, okay? So I leave this to you to be thought about, and then here we'll continue after the top 10 philosophers. We finished David Hume, we finished Jean-Paul Sartre. Okay, so he is known also to be as one. He has a very famous sentence. He said, "To be human is to be conscious." So he was talking about responsibility, and he also said that if God, this is a sentence also that is very difficult to understand, but that was his way he produced it. He said, if God exists, man is not free, and if God is not there, man is free. So he was not a believer. Okay, that was Sartre. So he was also supposed to be treated as an artist also. Now this is number 8. This is another philosopher. He's John Locke. John Locke. Let's talk about now John Locke. John Locke is one. This is his portrait. He was born in 1697. Okay, and you can see here he was from England. Okay, and an English philosopher. He was educated in Oxford University, and he was considered to be related to the 17th century as a philosopher. Okay, and or what we call Enlightenment, the era of Enlightenment. Also here, we can talk about his school of philosophy as based on empiricism. Now, John Locke talked about empiricism, which is, let's discuss this word. Empiricism is a theory that states that knowledge comes only or primarily from sensory experience. Okay, so he did not believe but in what is empirical. Okay, المحسوس only. Okay, المجرب. Okay, so it is one of the several views of epistemology. In epistemology, فلسفة المعرفة, you have different ways of thinking in epistemology. We can think of epistemology in terms of rationality, which is rationalism in philosophy. You can think of it that was the idea of Hume, David Hume. We can think of it in terms of skepticism, الشك, منهج الشك, in terms of empiricism, اللي هي التجريبية, okay, and the emphasis of what is called as the empirical evidence on ideas. So if you don't have empirical evidence on ideas, it is not accepted according to John Locke, sorry. Now, so he was the foundational, he talked about foundational conceptualism. And what is conceptualism? It is part of metaphysics. It's a theory that explains universality of particulars as a conceptualized framework situated in the thinking mind. So he was the one to think of realism against to conceptualism, الواقعية والفكرية. So he raised the idea of realism, and he also talked about theories of truth and theory of meaning. So this is very important to you guys in the English department, philosophy of meaning, okay? اللغويات, linguistics, okay? So he dealt with this, John Locke, very famous one. And he also talked about a very famous book which is called Social Contract, العقد الاجتماعي, which is considered to be a philosophical work. It's moral and political. It talks about a theory or a model that was raised in the age of enlightenment, as I told you. And it talks about the legitimacy of authority and how the state rules over individuals, and that social contract arguments should be taken into consideration. So whatever you can hear nowadays about العقد الاجتماعي or social contract was because of him, thanks to him. And he also discussed natural law as a system of law based on observation of natural human nature. Okay, and this is the main idea. And of course, he was also considered as one of the major philosophers in classical or representing classical liberalism, الliberالية الكلاسيكية, which is a political ideology and branch of liberalism. Okay, he advocated civil liberties and the rule of law, and he was thinking about economy and freedom of economy. So here you can see his major ideas. Now his interests were, if you want to search for him, see what did he do, you can see him in metaphysics, in epistemology, in political philosophy, in philosophy of mind also, like David Hume also. And he discussed economics also. So lots of works at that time. You can see philosophers used to believe in, and I do believe in this interdisciplinary, that humanities have to be connected in science, and that was his signature also, the real signature of him. So to talk about him briefly, once again, we can see that he is an English philosopher. He was also a physician, by the way, and he was influenced by very influential of Enlightenment thinkers, فلاسفة التنويريين in Arabic we say, and he was known as the father of liberalism. This is very important. هو أب الليبرالية, أبو الليبرالية, John Locke. So he's like the founder of it. Okay, so he is this is a liberalism is a political and moral philosophy, فلسفة اجتماعية أخلاقية وسياسية, based on the idea of liberty, and it talks about the concept of the government and the approval, okay, and equality, the idea of taking equality before law. Equality is more important than law. This is according to John Locke and to liberalism. And always liberals, they think of, they try to understand the principles of liberty and how it affects free market and free trade, and you know, and also individual rights. Now, he was considered as one of the first British empiricists. Of course, we can add to him David Hume, okay? And we have another one who's called Sir Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon, another important philosopher. I think you should know. He was considered as the, you know, philosopher of what was called later on for a scientific method of influencing everything in his scientific method. فيلسوف علمي أكثر, Francis Bacon. So we said that he introduced that in social contract that we discussed now, and he was he developed the field of epistemology, which is a branch of philosophy that is, you know, that deals with knowledge and that deals with the idea of justification and rationality and beliefs. That was his major issue. Also political philosophy that deal with the idea or the theory of politics and how it affects laws and authority and legitimate, they discussed legitimate governments and freedoms and rights. Also, his writings influenced later a very famous philosopher, I'm sure you know, who's called Voltaire. Voltaire, he was known as a French Enlightenment writer and also a historian at that time. he has many criticisms on Christianity, and he was supposed as a Roman Catholic to belong to the Roman Catholic Church, but at that time they were trying to reform, and so he advocated freedom of speech and freedom of religion. So another famous a politician or philosopher was Voltaire. Then we have also affected also Jean-Jacques Rousseau. We'll talk about now later. And you can see here Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He is a Genevan philosopher and a writer and a composer also. And he was his main field was political philosophy, and he was considered as in the Enlightenment era also, and he was one of the major, let's say, influencers of what is called the French Revolution that we talked last time about, and he introduced modern political and economic education thought, and so on. So we have, of course, also affected the American Revolution, as we discussed last time. That was after the defeat of the British in American Revolution War. Okay. Till the classical, you know, his contribution to the classical Republican or Republicanism and liberal theory that was reflected in the United States Declaration of Independence. Then we have, of course, the conceptions of Locke's theory of mind that he was interested in affected also the conception of the identity of the self, the discussion about the self and identity that was later discussed by David Hume and Immanuel Kant, the one who was really known, and now David Hume, the one we talked about, who is a Scottish philosopher, and we talked about his empiricism, okay, in the beginning, and his treatise of human nature, and also Immanuel Kant, that is a German philosopher, very well known in the Central Enlightenment as one of the Central Enlightenment thinkers, and he talked about metaphysics and epistemology and ethics. Kant is well known in his moral system and ethical thinking of the idea of peace, that it is ethical to believe in peace. Peace is the major, you know, it's the end of moral human being. Okay, then very important to know that John Locke was the founder of what is called the ideas of concerning the mind, and he raised what is called that he said that in its birth the mind was or is just a blank state or blank slate, if you want to consider it here, and he called it tabula rasa. Okay, so that was اللوحة البيضاء أو الصفيحة البيضاء أو الصفحة البيضاء. So what is tabula rasa that was discussed by John Locke or introduced by him? It is in theory that the individuals are all born without built-in mental content. So when you are born, you have nothing in mind. It's like a built-in mental content, and therefore all knowledge comes from experience and perception. كل شيء بنتعلمه and كل شيء بناخده by experience. And he thought about epistemological proponents of tabula rasa, and he was against the doctrine of what is called anatism, which is the opposite of tabula rasa. We have two different ways of thinking of it. That was contrary to Cartesian, which is according to René Descartes, who was a native, you know, French, who thought the other way. Okay. So he believed in, he maintained that we are born without, you see, without innate ideas. We don't have innate ideas, and that knowledge instead is determined only by experience and sense and perception. So this is the only way we can reach knowledge to him, according to him. Okay. Also, Locke believed in empiricism as same as David Hume, and he established a method of what is called introspection. Now, what is introspection? It's observing of emotions and behaviors of oneself. Okay, so it is the examination of one's own conscious thoughts and feelings. So it's you try to examine your feelings and your thoughts. This is in introspection. I don't know what. Let's try to see what's the definition of introspection in Arabic. The translation, introspection. Okay, let's see. It's in Arabic istibtan. Okay, istibtan. So this is he introduced this idea in introspection, that it is working on your self reflection. Okay, so this is his method, and here you can see different his ideas through his theories of religion. He also John Locke introduced many ideas on tolerance, al-tasamuh, okay, and he was one of the famous introducers or thinkers who participated in Constitution of Carolina and theory value on property. He has many political theories, and he talked about theory, price theory, and monetary thoughts. So he was related to economics and philosophy of economy also. The idea of self and dream arguments, religious beliefs, philosophy from religion. Okay, here you can see lots of his works. Let's see his works, because through his works you can understand what he was believing in. Okay, sorry, where is it? Okay, major philosophies, and here external links on his works. Okay, now here you can see different works, as you can see in any work when you talk about the citation. Okay, you can see, for example, John Locke on liberal works. For example, Locke on freedom, political philosophy, and annual journal of Locke research. Also, you have theories of knowledge. Okay, and we have many or different thesis and dissertation on that. Also, you can see his human understanding and on the second treatise of government, and so on. Okay. Now, going back to another philosopher, that was John Locke. Okay. We'll continue now the video. Now, till now, we are taking only the first three. Let's continue.
A British philosopher in the late 1600s, Locke proposed that the mind was a blank slate.
So here he was talking about the tabula rasa. So he was talking also about natural law that are essential, and that the government need to protect. And this is his essay, John Locke essay on human nature. Okay, that was his. He wrote them in 4 books. So it is about principles and foundations of government. So that they were affecting French and American revolutions. Okay. Now this is another philosopher who's called John Jean-Jacques Rousseau, very well known. let's see Jean-Jacques Rousseau here. This is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Another you can see from Geneva, a Republic of Geneva, considered to be as French, okay, at that time, it's Kingdom of France, okay, that was in 1712. So he belongs to the Western philosophy, and his school is social contract. We talked about social contract. That's a theory or the model that originated during the age of Enlightenment, and also considered as one of the philosophers who belonged to Romanticism, which was an artistic, literary, musical, intellectual movement that was originated in Europe at the end of the 18th century. And it was, characterized as one of the schools that concentrate on emotions. Okay, now his main consideration is political philosophy, also musician, and some of his notable ideas refer to what is called the general will, al-irada al-amma. Okay, in political philosophy, general will is the will of the people, أو الإرادة العامة, yes, as a whole, يعني الإرادة الجمعية, let's say, for the people. And that was the beginning that made or influenced the constitution of the 18th century Geneva philosopher, one of the main ideas. And then we have amour de soi in French, which is love of oneself, حب الآخر, sorry, of the other, حب الآخر. It's a concept of philosophy of Jean-Jacques Rousseau that refers to the kind of self-love, يعني حبك لذاتك, okay, self-love, that humans share with brute animals, and which is he thinks that we share this together with animals, so it's the same. What animals do have is what human beings do have. It's amour de soi, self-love, حب الذات, okay. And he also discussed what is called in French amour propre, which means loving oneself. Amour propre, loving oneself, whereas in philosophy it is a debate theory of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who approved the word amour de soi as another meaning of self-love. Propre means the right, or the exact. Okay. Now, and also discussed human nature, or moral simplicity of human nature, which is a concept that denotes the fundamental disposition of characteristics. Okay, that belong to feeling and acting, and that they have to be natural. So he talked about its simplicity because it's human kind. It's the essence of humankind, and this is what makes it moral-like. And also he talked about child-centered learning. So this is in education that we call it learner-centered education, which talks about the method of teaching that shifts the focus on the instruction from the teacher to the student. So it's very important. Until nowadays, it's affecting education. So in Arabic, التأثير self-centered, يعني إنه المتعلم هو الأساس. It's not the teacher, it's the learner. Okay, so this is how he thought of the education system that should be, that you search, you learn, and even the teacher understands and learns from the student. He talked also about civil religion, which refers to civic religion and the implicit religious values of a nation. and also popular sovereignty and positive liberty and public opinion, الرأي العام. Okay, all this is his Rosso, how he used to sign. Of course, you can see that the article, which is about Jean-Jacques Rousseau as a director here, he was very famous, and of course, as you can see, he affected all aspects of French Revolution. He was considered as one of the Enlightenment thinkers, and he was some of his major works were Discourse on Inequality. Discourse on inequality. It's part of a discourse on the origin of the basis of inequality among men. يعني اللامساواة. Okay, and so he was also commonly known as the second discourse at that time. And we have the first, which is the social contract, very famous, which was published at that time as part of Principles of Political Rights. And that was a book in 1762. Very famous book on as part that introduced later discourse of inequality. He has many novels also. Of course, I'm sure you know his novels more than me in Romanticism. And we have, for example, this is very famous, Emily, or Emile, or Emily, I think in French, Emily, or on education. It's a treatise on the nature of education. So he also wrote many things in the field of education, not only in philosophy. And it's, Emily is considered to be as one of the people who were introduced to education through by nature. Okay, so it's very important because it talks about how kids should be treated by education. Okay, so it's an educational treatise, and also he has his confessions. He published confessions. In Christianity, we have the idea of confessing to the priest. So he talked about the confession here in a different way. It was an autobiographical book by him, where he tried to order all his confessions to a saint called Augustine. We'll talk about him later. And also he has a work that was not finished, which is called Reveries of a Solitary Walker. Again, another book or autobiography that was not finished, and The Age of Sensibility. It's, kind of literary work that talks about sensibility. Okay. Here you can see, so that he was during the period of Revolution, French Revolution. Now here you can see his major works, if you want, which is Dissertation sur la musique moderne, dissertation in modern music. Okay. Also we have Discours sur l'économie politique, Discourse on political economy, and Lettres écrites de la montagne, which is letters written from the mountain. Okay, and so on. Here are some of his works. Okay, he talked about the origin of languages. I think this is very important for you in your department to study this. I recommend it. Okay, you should read it. Of course, Discourse on Arts and Science. Okay. Here his major works, Emily on Education, Social Contract, okay, and so on, his main works. Let me go back. Now, I think that I should stop here at Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and next time we'll continue listening to the other part. We'll begin with number 6, which is Socrates. But let me continue this. Let's see if there's anything. So this is the social contract and the political theories. Okay, talking about democracy, droit politique. Okay, so he's the one who said that man is born free. So he talked about citizenship, duties, okay, and the state's obligations. Here, this is it. Okay. Okay, so we'll stop here. The next time we'll continue from we'll talk about Socrates, and we'll continue and I'll leave everything to you now on the channel. I'll stop recording now.